1954, I came to the United States. As a matter of fact, I didn't come just to the United States. They sent me to the United States to study engineering. I have an engineering degree from University of Tehran, and it was in civil engineering, structure, construction, hydraulic, things like that. The end of my, let's say, this grant, a study grant as engineering, I didn't go back. So I went to University of Colorado, finished my master's degree in engineering. Then I look around, I saw there is a architecture there. And I was interested in architecture because I wasn't very good in calculus and integral equation and all that, They give me credit for engineering courses, of course. So it took me only 3 years to graduate from University of Colorado, Bachelor of Science in Architecture. Why stay in Denver? There's nothing in Denver. So I researched the architects that I liked, and I decided to go to east. And I stopped in every offices for an interview. I went to Boston, and Vincent Kling in Philadelphia offered me a job. Then I went to Philip Johnson's office, and in Seagram Building, 38th floor, and he looked at me. He said, "Paul will talk to you." Paul Foster, is Foster? Yeah, was his man, his right-hand man. I mean, Philip Johnson just comes around and look at the drawing and make comments, which was very, very interesting. And they told me that, when can you start? Lived in New York City in an apartment, tiny apartment, $500. So I won a design competition for about $5,000. I became second. And I said, well, I want to go to graduate school. And that's, as I told you, that I applied for 3 universities, and finally, because I liked Paul Rudolph's work, I accept Yale. But there is an interesting thing happened in getting to Yale. We had to take graduate entrance exam. Then I received a letter from King Wu, because he was one of the older professor at Yale. He wants to interview me. I went there to interview him. He said, well, you got very interesting portfolio, but your English is the level of high school. So they accepted me because I told them already architecture doesn't much English, but I had to take a elective, and I went to take urban sociology. And the first week he gave us 4 books to read. I couldn't finish one book. I really missed that time at Yale. We had many well-known architects, such as Louis Kahn came here for 2 weeks. Paul Rudolph would bring in various architects. Some of them were against him, against his cubist things he does. So juries were very interesting, very, very interesting. And they talk about each other, and they, the students stand there. So there were 16 students in that class. Five of them left. They couldn't take it. We were working, believe it or not, till midnight every night. And it's a very demanding situation, it's a very serious situation. And we were exposed to many, many ideas, many architects. When I graduated, I said, well, yeah, I had an offer with IMP and Franzen is another architect. Pretty good architect, but I said, if I accept this thing, I have to live in Queens or, outside of New Jersey or somewhere, and I don't want to live there. And I want to go, I came back to Denver. Planetarium was when I established my office after, Saul and Hatami, Saul and Tanaka. And there was a planning director in university. He came interview me. I said, I don't have experience in planetarium. He said, we know that. Who has experience in planetarium? But I think we want a good design. I said, well, that's nice of you to say that. And I went to visit a bunch of planetarium. An idea I had was that from the observatory, students walk in terraces, come down to the roof of the building, to the roof of planetarium, going around that geodesic dome, and then get down to the surface. They liked the idea, everything, but they didn't. They sat on that project. They didn't build it for 6-7 years because they didn't want to probably spend money for upkeeping, for director, for other staff of the planetarium. Then Fiske family called them, I guess, as I heard that they don't know they'll get the money away. So after 6-7 years, the construction costs went up, and we had to cut a bunch of stuff like that. And it could have been much nicer. I really enjoyed very much teaching because even less talented students were very challenging for me, because end of the semester I see this young man or woman has improved a great deal, and that is rewarding for me. And there were students very, very talented. It was not the product of a school. It was their intention and their method of thinking and researching, digging out really architecture. And I learned a lot from them, I really enjoyed it. The minute I walked out of a studio, I said, oh God, I am. But really, I enjoy teaching, so I was a full-time teacher. In a school, I was how do I say that? I spoke my ideas for education of these children. Nobody paid attention. You say, that they call me troublemaker. Even it is the system of education really is bad. There are probably 20 schools or 10 schools in the country. They're doing good. The rest of 100 schools in this country is really, really bad. I mean, no architects wants to say, I am doing bad design. Why do we have so many bad design? Because they don't know what the good design is. You know, it doesn't mean they all should be Corbusier, Frank Lloyd Wright, etc., etc. I mean, a good architecture shows itself. So this is a good architecture. So, in a school, you know, can you imagine University of Colorado has 1,200 students, architecture. Do we need 1,200 architects first place? The grandeur of any nation, any society, depends on their architecture. And that's really, you think about it, is true in United States, in Europe, in old Europe, in everywhere that still has, those buildings is a represent of the society that made it happen. Anyway, I went 1 year over there, and trying to find that city. It's an amazing city, and you're never gonna cover Paris. It's impossible. Then I came back and I proposed the students, we take students to Paris to study architecture because it's very rewarding. There is nothing to see in here. They agree, they accept that. For 5 years, I had students going to Paris, but then they stopped that program. For 8 weeks, you know, or 6 weeks, or 8 weeks, 10 weeks project. They did project. I had other architects, French architects, coming to give them a credit and all that. So the meantime, you know, I like the city, I like the culture. And we said we buy a little apartment there. We bought a little apartment in near Montmartre. It was, I like that area, by the way. They tell me that, why you like Paris? I said, I feel like I'm living in world civilization first. You know, you see a building of 8th century, 4th century, then this magnificent architecture. They done, some of them are so, French finish it. It doesn't matter how much it's going to cost. If they did take a project, they approve the thing, they finish it. That is a respect for architecture. So besides the language I like, besides the culture, is very, very rich. It's a city of museum. They like a key museum, key that big, the key that big. This is very interesting, you know. And besides that, is the city gives me, I couldn't walk very much, element of surprise, element of discovery. Is like human life, you know. You should have surprise, you should have variety, you should have other element that, you know, stimulate your senses, and that city does. You know, you turn the corner, wow, look at those little tiny place. And so you never get tired of living there. I always said I like to be 30 years old with all the experience I have learned during my life. That doesn't happen. So I could tell him lots of good things, you know. You know, you learn, you go through the life, you learn. As a matter of fact, today I think I'm sitting in here, the past is very present. You know, I know where I landed in United States, where I was working for that geologist in Tehran and all that. It's very, very, I don't remember my life, by the way, my childhood. But this element that you go through the life is very present for me. So, first of all, I would tell him that if you like, why do you want to go architecture? So if they like it, then I would advise him how to go about it. You know, this is kind of a profession, nobody think about it, that is very powerful. You dictate people's life, but they don't think that way. You tell them, enter here, go to the right, go stairs up, go to the left, is your bedroom. All right, it's a thing like that, or offices, or many function is laid out by architect. The architect has a great deal of power to tell them how to go about places, the cities, and nobody thinks that way. Nobody takes it like that. But, you know, we tell the people how to live, what kind of environment to live. Fortunately, you know, most of them are very nice. In my view, in hierarchy of architecture, practice of architecture, a visual aspect and beauty comes first. You know, definitely the rest of the very important, the rest of the building has to be done properly, but you don't call those architecture. You know, architecture is ideas and looks and the environment that you create for the people walk by it and say, wow, what a building. But then you go, it's like the same thing that you buy anything. You buy a car, you say, wow, look at this car, fabulous. You walk in, you sit on it, it's comfortable, and you ask how much. Then if it's too much, you can afford it. How much is the gas mileage? How is the brake? 4 brake, 2 brake. Then the same thing in a building. Building is understood that the building structure should stay there. Safety should be there. And that time wasn't all this they broke the stigmatization of architecture. They brought all these things, you know, many things came in the practice. You know, that such as green architecture. What is a green architecture? All right. Sustainable architecture. What is a sustainable? My life is not sustainable. So what is sustainable architecture? All this building, even in Denver or in the world, are sustained. Are this a branch of architecture? You do sustainable architecture, and there are lots of buildings that shouldn't be there, in terms of a health, in terms of a safety and all that. So, but we went through that architecture. Came gradually today. Architects make money on these words.